You know, as we talk about the reasons that people question home ownership, I think fear is generally the biggest emotion, and the reason why they often choose not to jump into home ownership. And certainly it's a commitment. It is a commitment to maintain the property because there isn't a landlord taking care of that anymore. It's a commitment that you can not only spend your money on, but that you can have some dynamic tax benefit from. As you mentioned, we can't deduct the interest on our four-wheelers or our pickups or our toys, but we can deduct the interest on our mortgages still. That mortgage interest tax deduction is huge, and one of those things that's going to be before our legislators again here very soon. So this may air after we have all voted. It may not. I'm not positive about that, but that's a huge thing to keep in mind as we look at the big picture, because that mortgage interest tax deduction is a significant reason to become a homeowner and to make a difference in your monthly pocketbook. There are lots of other advantages. You know, you get to paint your walls green if you want to, and you get to hang your pictures, and you get to make some choices about your financial freedom and your emotional freedom, and it's a great investment. And certainly no investment is a guarantee anymore. I don't have one that's a guarantee, but over the long haul, real estate has been a better long-term choice. Would you agree with that from a landlord's perspective?
Most definitely it has. It's the worse things get in the economy, the more valuable a rental property is, because someone can get in by satisfying only whatever needs that the landlord has. Maybe a month-to-month tenancy, you know, certainly not a long-term 30-year kind of a lease obligation. So as things change in their lives, being a renter allows them to be more flexible. But having said that, it also doesn't provide stability for them to where they own the home, they know what their payments and expenses are, they can make choices, and they're not building equity.
And that's a real factor in why home ownership is attractive. Right now, today, is a great time to buy a home. We've talked about some of those reasons. I attended a meeting a short time ago, and in that meeting it was stated that supply and demand is still a core economic factor in everything that happens. And as an industry, we stopped building new homes in about January of 2008 because of that supply and demand factor. And this particular economist was indicating that we're soon to be coming upon a housing shortage based on that. They quoted some numbers about echo boomers, they called them, and they indicated that there were 80 million people in the United States between the ages of 18 and 31, and that the age 30 was typically the target date for when a tenant rolled into a home buyer. And that if those trends remain, that there will be a housing shortage on the forefront, and that values will raise to the point that it may not be as affordable as it is right now. So right now is the best time in your lifetime to buy a house. And I know that education, we've talked about that a little bit, is huge in the way that we direct our customers and clients right now. How do you, because we're really talking about first-time buyers at this point, how do you educate someone in a different way when they come to you as a first-time home buyer? What are some things that you look for and that you counsel them about from your perspective as a financial?
Mostly what I try to counsel them on is a sales price or a monthly mortgage payment, more importantly, and what they really can afford versus what they really can't afford, so that they don't end up in foreclosure in a couple years. Regardless of how good their interest rate is or how cute the house is, they have to be able to afford it. And so with first-time homebuyers especially, we spend a lot of time going over their current expenses and what the expenses on the house will be to make sure that their debt-to-income ratio is within line and that they'll be able to live and not just
well, because oftentimes qualifying based on those ratios is not really what their budget is set for, because you can oftentimes qualify for more house than you really can afford.
Absolutely.
Anything else that you see as a trend as you talk to those first-time home buyers?
Just education on everything from programs to credit. A lot of times it's going over credit and what portion of my credit score is derived from the amount of credit cards that I have, or what portion of my credit score is derived from I didn't make my car payment within 30 days last month. And so a lot of times it's just educating them on their specific circumstances instead of as a broad talking about loan programs. But here's where you are, here's where your credit score is, here's where your debt to income ratio is. This is what you would qualify for.
And even if you're not at a point where you are ready based on some things that you're still working on in your credit, knowing what you qualify for is an important thing that comes out of sitting down with a mortgage officer and being part of that education process. Because sometimes as we deal with customers and clients, it's months before they actually arrive from that pre-qual cycle to actual home ownership. I know that you don't necessarily sit down with customers and clients anymore and actually facilitate the paperwork of the closing. But as you talk to your closing officers, I'm sure there's a trend as people come to the table, documents that they're maybe going over a little bit more in depth than they might have otherwise. What are you seeing from that perspective, Mary?
You know, the new RESPA rules that were put into place in January have helped a lot, because there's an additional page to the settlement statement now that clearly identifies all of the terms and conditions of the loan that they're getting out. So there should be no surprises. So we emphasize making sure that that page has been gone over thoroughly, so that they understand what kind of a loan they're getting, what the interest rate's going to be, if there's any changes built in that could happen, interest rate changes, that kind of a thing, that they're fully aware of that. And we go over that before any of the other documents, really, so that by the time they're ready to sign the documents, they understand the implications of everything that they're signing. And then people do have questions these days about title. It's not something that they just take for granted, because everybody's heard a horror story from someone. And so I think a lot of our customers are asking more intelligent questions about what if and what's covered or not covered with their title insurance policies. And they're very good questions and much more informed consumers when they leave.
I think that's a bonus of what's happened with this economy, is that we've had to do our jobs better, and we've had to train our customers in a way that we maybe didn't have to, because everyone took so many things for granted before. And so I don't know that that's all bad. Inventory is kind of our surprise from a realtor's perspective, in that you can have 178 homes between 80 and 120,000 to show somebody, and that's ludicrous. We used to be able to put them in the car 3 times, drive them around and say, pick one, and that isn't the way it works anymore. So as I know, the last time we did Realtor Talk, we talked about a wish list, and I think that that's even more important as we talk to customers and clients and kind of narrow the field a little bit, because there is so much to choose from that it can be overwhelming. And as a first-time homebuyer with so many things on the table as far as RESPA guidelines and financial options and coming up with down payments they maybe didn't have to come up with before, and things that are just overwhelming on a normal basis, to put them in the car and show them 178 homes is not a fun time. And so I think that inventory perspective from a realtor perspective is a challenge. Not a bad thing, but a challenge from a professional standpoint. It's certainly from a consumer standpoint a positive thing.
It is.
A positive thing. As we look at numbers and statistics, which is really what we all do for a living, is look at statistics, along with dealing with education and helping you meet your wish list guideline, we have seen a decline in values. It hasn't been, we talked a little bit about how it hasn't been as dramatic as in some parts of the country. We've seen an increase in some costs across the board, and that is just kind of the way it is. Mary talked about RESPA. Let's talk about RESPA for just a minute in a way that you can explain what the changes to the guidelines were in a way that it better helps the consumer.
I think that the change that best helps the consumer is that everything's uniform. So if you go to Eagle Home Mortgage or any other lending institution here in Pocatello, you're going to see the same forms that you can compare side by side to make sure you're getting the best deal that you can when you're shopping providers. The other thing is, on that page that Mary was talking about, that they go over at the title company, it says this is what you were quoted and this is what your final number is. So there's no more of, well, we're at the closing table, but we forgot to tell you about these fees, or we forgot to tell you you have a prepayment penalty, or we forgot to tell you. We can't change that by law. And so when you come in and meet with me and I say, I can do your loan and it's going to cost you this much money, it's going to cost you this much money. Bottom line. It took away a lot of the surprises.
And that's a good thing.
The bad
surprises. Yeah, there are some good surprises out there as you jump into the home ownership arena, but financing was one of those that had its challenges as we hit the closing table with a lender that maybe wasn't quite as professional as some, and there were huge financial surprises, and buyers ended up coming to the table with hundreds of more dollars than they had expectation to. Let's talk for just a minute maybe, because it's kind of been that time of year lately, on a property tax basis. Property taxes are challengeable, and they a lot across the board last year, this last assessment period, went down.
They did.
And so if you are a current homeowner and in a position where you think your property assessment is more than the value of your home, there is a challenge process for that. And on the flip side, if you're moving into the phase of home ownership, understand that there are some latitudes in that you can justify some things. And if you have a property tax assessment that is a higher value than what your appraisal or your sales price was, there is some justification as you meet with the county assessor and deal with those things. And so again, not sure when this will air, but those are choices that we all have the opportunity to make. Anything you'd like to add in closing?
You know, like you said, it's a great time to buy, and I don't think that prices are going to stay low in Pocatello for much longer, because we have a lot of really good things coming in 2011. So
prices aren't going to stay low, and interest rates aren't going to stay as low as they are. And with the interest rates, you really can't afford more house and pay more towards the principal of your home instead of interest to the bank.
It is a great time to buy, and if you aren't recognizing that, maybe get with a professional and acknowledge that. Thanks for joining us for Realtor Talk. We'll see you next time.